Good evening, everybody. Welcome. We are live from Books and Books here in Coral Gables, Florida, with thanks to the Knight Foundation for their generous support. To our internet audience watching, if at any time during tonight's presentation you'd like to give us a call, we'll get you a book autographed and we'll send it to you free of charge anywhere in the U.S. for the shipping, not for the book, just for the shipping. For those of you here, I ask you to please silence your cell phones and also remind you that you can take photographs if you'd like, but try to refrain from using the flash because that'll blind our internet cameras. I have a camera over there and a camera over there that's pointed at the audience for the Q&A portion of the event. You can also check out all these events online. They're all recorded. They're all archived. We've got about 500 up to now over the last 2.5, 3 years. So feel free to go to booksandbooks.com to check out those events. While you're there, give us your email address. That way we can keep you posted with everything that goes on here at the store. We do quite a bit of events here at the store. We do about 60 every month, so there's sure to be something for everybody there. You can also follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Tonight we are very pleased to have with us Miss Nadia Asencio and Politiquette, the People's Guide to Political Discourse in the New Millennium. But to introduce our author this evening, we have a very special guest. Mr. Mark Caputo joined Politico Florida from the Miami Herald in January 2015. He writes the Florida Playbook and covers the politics of one of the country's key swing states. Mark grew up in Key West and has a contagious passion for chronicling the Sunshine State's political intrigue along with his consequential policy experiments. A veteran of the Herald since 2003, Mark was known for his Caputo Cam videos from the state capitol in Tallahassee and his strong reporting. He helped expose campaign finance scandals that led to 2 federal convictions. Please give him a warm welcome, Mr. Mark Caputo.
I should hire you more often to introduce me everywhere. That was awesome. Thank you. I feel a little more important than I am. It's my pleasure today to introduce someone you know, Nadia Asencio, who's worked for years in Miami politics. And she's written Politiquette, and I did kind of question her sanity because I'm not known as being the most etiquette-friendly person. But nevertheless, she decided, why don't you do this, Mark? Now, the reason she wrote this book is hopefully we can start having a more civil discourse in our politics, which we really don't have right now. I don't know if any of you guys have noticed, if you've been on social media, the bar for our political discourse is set pretty low. Unfortunately, I think sometimes I might contribute to that. So without further ado, let me introduce Nadia. Nadia Asencio, ladies and gentlemen.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here tonight. I'm very honored to be here at Books and Books with my family, my friends, a couple of new faces. Thank you all so much for your time. Our nation and our state in particular is still reeling from the violent acts over the weekend in Orlando. So I'd like to take a moment to honor those that were lost and the families and the communities that were affected. Partisanship is a cancer. It is addicting and it is blinding. After many years working in politics, voting for candidates in both parties, and speaking to hundreds of voters in South Florida about political and economic issues, I realized that until the American people are willing to look beyond partisan rhetoric and lies, we will not be able to effectively address the very real issues that we are facing today in our nation. If this election has taught us anything, it is that our political system is made up of a 2-party corporate monopoly. Choosing the lesser of 2 evils isn't exactly what our founding fathers had in mind when they fought to create this nation. But until the American people can abandon partisanship and learn to work together, then that's exactly the choice we're going to have to live with. And not just in this election, but in every election going forward. Let's switch up the mood a little bit. How many of you here tonight consider yourselves Apple people? Yeah? Okay, and how many of you think that Apple people are bordering on a cult? Now, how many Android people do we have here tonight? Well, and how many of you think that Android people are out of the loop? And who even uses BlackBerry anymore? Like nobody, right? This is what happens when you have only 2 viable choices when shopping for a phone. Each group claims to prefer their choice because they've done the research. But in reality, we choose the brands we do because we identify strongly with the idea that the brand is selling us. Apple says, I'm cutting edge. Android says, I don't follow the crowd. Basically, it's the same message, but brilliant marketing makes you think otherwise. Our consumer choices say something about us, about our lifestyle, about what's important to us. More than any other factor, however, brand loyalty is the result of having fewer options. When we have more options, we're open to different viewpoints. But when we have only two choices, this or that, then the brand has the power to define us instead of us defining ourselves. Just notice that this doesn't happen when we go shopping for cereal or shoes or a car. That's because we have more options. So we take the time to vet the products, to find a better fit. I might be a Mercedes-Benz person this year, and honestly, I wish I were. But in a couple of years, I could be a Fiat person or a bicycle person, depending on how my needs change and what's important to me at the time. When we're looking to buy, we ask our friends and neighbors for their opinions, and we don't take offense if they tell us that a CRV is bad on gas or that a Jeep might save us money on repairs. We're not threatened by these perspectives, or we don't accuse the other person of sabotaging our choices. In fact, we welcome them. That's because smart consumers actually value the advice of others and take other experiences into account before making a purchase. In fact, they'll even pay for this advice. If you don't believe me, Google Angie's List for proof. Angie's List is a multi-million-dollar website based on the idea that the best way to vet a company is by allowing consumers to share their experiences on an open forum without corporate intervention. After all, if you're going to take a company's word for how great they are, then shouldn't you expect at least a little dishonesty? Now, does that mean that branding is bad? Not at all. Companies need to communicate their products and culture to us in a way that's easily accessible and understood. But when we bind ourselves to a brand over loyalty, instead of remaining open to other consumer experiences, then we're giving up our ability to see the value in other options. We give up our ability to see the flaws in our choices, and we give up our power to set a higher standard. Notice what happens when there's no competition in industry, such as when nations practice protectionism. The initial intention seems logical. Let's protect our own industries by taxing imports. But the results are disastrous. When a firm knows it has no competition, it starts slacking. Because there's no competition, there's no urgency to innovate or to produce better goods and services at a fair price. Before long, the public ends up paying a higher price for subpar products. It's a lose-lose scenario. The same is true in sports. It's competition that spurs innovation and effort. Without it, everybody slacks. And the same is true in politics. Partisanship, excuse me, I'm sorry, my computer's asking me if I want to join your website, which I don't. Partisanship, yeah, well, there you go. Partisanship is to politicians what branding is to companies, a quick way to communicate with the public about what they're selling. But while partisanship and branding are vital to politicians and companies, they are detrimental to both consumers and voters when they hinder our willingness to question, compare, and contrast. Considering that competition breeds excellence in industry and sports, then doesn't it make sense to apply it to our political system as well? Think about it. If candidates from any party knew that voters had more options and that they would be vetted as individuals based on their actions and associations without the ability to hide behind party labels, then doesn't it make sense that they'd think twice before creating questionable policies and forming shady alliances for campaign donations? Of course, it's not the responsibility of politicians to hold themselves accountable. As with industry, that's our job. What isn't our job is to defend the questionable actions of candidates that are running to represent us. It's not our job to cheerlead for any politician or to ignore their flaws. They work for us, not the other way around. A two-party system limits our options and fails to meet the needs of a large and diverse nation like the United States. And while partisanship may be good for politicians, it's disastrous for voters. When it comes to electing representatives to office, we're all better off shopping around. But how do we effectively vet candidates without communication? And how can we expect politicians to listen to us when we're unwilling to listen to each other? Look familiar? This is the premise behind Politiquette, and in it I offer 7 simple steps to help the American people communicate constructively in order to promote our interests and create a government that works for us. But before I get into those 7 steps, I need to clarify who the actors are in our political system. There are 3. First, we have the government, then we have industry, and finally, we have the people. To be clear, industry here is referring to large multinational corporations that affect entire economies around the globe, not to small mom and pop firms that make less than $5 million a year. So, if you're not creating foreign and domestic policy or affecting world trade and economies, then guess what? Like it or not, you're a member of the people. Like 3 legs of one stool, each actor is necessary and provides valuable functions for a productive and civilized society. For example, the people need the government to provide the protections necessary to create an environment conducive to freedom. It makes sense. If you're constantly fighting off aggressors, either foreign or domestic, you aren't really free to write the next great American novel or discover the cure for cancer, are you? In addition, the people need industry to produce the goods and services that allow them to accomplish more in less time, increasing their quality of life and achieving their highest potential in their chosen field. The recent technological boom has provided more productivity, more communication, and more opportunity to more people than in any other time in recorded history. Even the computers that we hold in our hands today, whether iPhones or Android, are light years ahead of the megacomputers of the not-so-distant past. We can thank industry for that. In countless ways, both the government and industry provide valuable functions for the people by creating an environment in which we are truly free to progress. Likewise, both the government and industry depend on the people. To vote, therefore legitimizing our political system and their seat of power. To labor, to serve in the military, to innovate, to consume the goods and services that keep our economy thriving, and to pull together as one society for the advancement of the nation on the world stage. However, although codependent, it's important to note that these 3 actors have vastly different agendas. Sometimes these agendas collide. Sometimes they complement each other and coalesce. But while government and industry often cooperate for mutual gain, the American people have been convinced to split up and fight amongst ourselves. It's no wonder we can't protect our interests when we refuse to cooperate with the people on our same team. Which brings me to teams. Most Americans have bought into the idea that either the government or industry has the people's best interest in mind, and if left to function unabated, either would naturally benefit the people through mutual interests. But nothing could be further from the truth. Only the people have the people's best interest in mind, and only the people are incentivized to promote their own welfare. So how do we do this? By learning to speak to each other and pulling our resources. We're all in the same boat, and we will all be on the hook for our government's bad policies. Yes, even the people that you don't necessarily like. Once again. We need to accept this reality and keep it in mind, or we're going to keep getting more of the same. The goal of the people in political discourse should be to reach a consensus, a place from which we can work together to find solutions. Debating simply to win an argument is a waste of time and only feeds the status quo. Now for the 7 simple steps. Step 1, drop your labels. We've all heard the saying, labels are for soup cans, but what does that mean? Well, unlike soup, people are complicated and a lot less tasty. You can laugh, it's okay. There's a lot of stuff going on with the average person, a lot of different perspectives and beliefs, many of which might seem to contradict each other. When we label people to try to easily identify who they are, we're more apt to make mistakes. We miss out on truly understanding where that person is coming from and what's really driving their actions. When labeling representatives by political party, we often give them a pass for otherwise unacceptable behavior. We're unable to vet them because we don't want to go against our party, or because we don't want to give credit to what we consider to be the enemy camp. But partisanship cannot trump the welfare of our nation. When we drop our labels, we're better able to see what's really going on and to understand where the problems and the solutions lie. Step 2, ask questions and listen to the answers. If you'd please take a couple of minutes to watch this very short but very powerful video, I think it will explain a lot.
If I learned one lesson from my time with the CIA, it is this. Everybody believes they're the good guy. I was an officer with the CIA clandestine service and worked undercover on counterterrorism and intelligence all around the world for almost 10 years. The conversation that's going on in the United States right now about ISIS and about the United States overseas is more oversimplified than ever. Ask most Americans whether ISIS poses an existential threat to this country, and they'll say yes. That's where the conversation stops. If you're walking down the street in Iraq or Syria and ask anybody why America dropped bombs, you get, they were waging war on Islam. And you walk in America and you ask, why were we attacked on 9/11? And you get, they hate us because we're free. Those are stories manufactured by a really small number of people on both sides who amass a great deal of power and wealth by convincing the rest of us to keep killing each other. I think the question we need to be asking as Americans examining our foreign policy is whether or not we're pouring kerosene on a candle. The only real way to disarm your enemy is to listen to them. If you hear them out, if you're brave enough to really listen to their story, you can see that more often than not, you might have made some of the same choices if you'd lived their life instead of yours. An Al-Qaeda fighter made a point once during a debriefing. He said all these movies that America makes, like Independence Day and Hunger Games and Star Wars, they're all about a small, scrappy band of rebels who will do anything in their power with the limited resources available to them to expel an outside, technologically advanced invader. And what you don't realize, he said, is that to us, to the rest of the world, you are the Empire, and we are Luke and Han. You are the aliens, and we are Will Smith. But the truth is, when you talk to the people who are really fighting on the ground, on both sides, and ask them why they're there, they answer with hopes for their children, specific policies that they think are cruel or unfair. And while it may be easier to dismiss your enemy as evil, hearing them out on policy concerns is actually an amazing thing, because as long as your enemy is a subhuman psychopath that's going to attack you no matter what you do, this never ends. But if your enemy is a policy, however complicated, that we can work with. If I learned one lesson,
How many of you here have realized during a debate that the other person hasn't even listened to a word you've said? Right? They're just waiting for you to finish so that they can argue their point. And does this make you more or less inclined to listen to them? Exactly. Don't rush to make your point in a discussion. Listen first. You may have pegged the person you're addressing all wrong. You might actually agree with them on more issues than you originally thought. Don't assume that you know where the other person is coming from. Ask them. By asking why a person has taken a stance and truly listening to their response, you'll gain perspective into an issue that you wouldn't have had otherwise. Try it. I guarantee you'll learn something, and you'll increase your chances of being heard and understood as well. Step 3, share the facts. Who here hasn't had the wonderful experience of getting into a debate with a person who's a walking Google search? Right? It's very annoying. They spew out fact after fact like a machine. They know it all. But as soon as they start fact raging, what do we do? How do we respond? We stop listening. We tune them out. They may be right, but their delivery is all wrong. That's because nobody cares what you know until they know that you care. We're all entitled to our own opinions, but we're not entitled to our own facts. That being said, however, facts are not missiles meant to be hurled against the people. Share them instead. They'll have a much better chance of reaching your audience. Play fair. This guy look familiar? There's no way to reach a logical conclusion when your perceptions are based on faulty reasoning. I'm referring to fallacies here, and if you've ever used them in an argument, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. So don't pretend. Attacking a person's character instead of their argument doesn't prove your point, nor does it help you get your point across. Neither does exaggerating the other person's argument with sarcasm in order to make it easier to tear down. And remember that when you make a claim, it's your responsibility to back it up, not your audience's. Keep your statistics honest, taking into account that there were many factors involved that influenced those numbers shows that you've done your homework. And remember that just because one event follows another, it doesn't necessarily mean that the first caused the second. A great book on this subject is Freakonomics, and if you haven't already read it, do. By arguing in a fair way, you'll foster mutual respect. You'll create allies and inroads to help you accomplish mutual goals. Fallacies, although tempting, will only discredit you and will do nothing but muddy the waters. Step 5, change your mind. This is probably the toughest step for most people because they feel that changing their mind will be embarrassing, proof that they were once wrong, but we already knew you were wrong. We just didn't say anything. Ask yourself, what's wrong with admitting that you were wrong? It's normal and necessary to adapt to new situations and to change our opinions as we gain information. A flexible mind is a living mind, but a closed mind, that's a casket. George Bernard Shaw said it best. Those who cannot change their minds cannot change anything. Life is all about growth, and if you've experienced anything in life, you probably don't hold the same opinions today that you did when you were 18 years old, because let's admit it, that would be weird. Likewise, you're free to change your mind tomorrow as you see fit. Allow yourself this freedom, and don't forget to extend it to others. Shaming people into sticking to their old beliefs is pointless and unproductive. Step 6, switch sides. Have you ever been shocked by someone's opinion of you? Seriously. Have you ever heard someone's opinion of you and thought to yourself, what? That's not me. That's not what I meant. Did you feel that your words and your actions were misunderstood, taken the wrong way? That's the power of switching sides. Sometimes who we think we are isn't exactly the same person that we're perceived to be. Switching sides is a tactic commonly used in therapy and team building exercises. By putting ourselves in someone else's shoes, it helps us understand their actions even if we don't agree with them. It exposes any breakdowns in our own communication and reveals what we may be doing wrong that's causing the conflict. It also exposes the flaws in your argument so that you can adjust your position and correct yourself before someone else does. And finally, step number 7, my favorite, play nice. No personal attacks. Now, I know you would think that this goes without saying, but it actually happens way too often. This is the digital age, right? So everything you say, comment, tweet, text, email, can and will be used against you into perpetuity. So act like it. Keep it respectful. No name calling, and especially no attacking anyone's family. Since the advent of social media, it's easy to forget to play nice because social media has a way of making us think that somehow discussions on the internet are not real. The people that we're speaking to are not real people. We're never going to meet them. It doesn't really matter. It's just Facebook. The repercussions can be ghastly, and unfortunately, I know this firsthand. So, I was on Facebook, like I usually am, and I was on a closed forum. So I'm discussing politics, and we're really getting into it, but it's closed, so I figure everybody's not going to see this. It doesn't really matter, whatever. So we're really going at it, and there's this one woman in particular. The subject was education. So I have my beliefs. She had hers. But I felt that I was presenting very opinions and based on facts and numbers and analysis, and I was providing links and all this, and she was just giving me her opinion. That's how I saw it. Just her opinion based on talking points, and she doesn't know anything, so I did the worst thing that anybody could do. I went on LinkedIn and I trolled her. And I went through her entire work history and all her associations. And I went back on Facebook and I tore her down and I exposed her. And she was not a credible person, and this is why, and she worked here, and all her associates and everything. Like the worst thing that you could do. I did that. So I shut her up, of course. And, it was over. 2 weeks later, I'm at a political function, and this woman sidles up to me at the bar. Yeah. And she says, "Hello, Nadia." And her face was, to me, I didn't know her. During my debates on Facebook, I didn't stop to actually look through pictures. I was just like, information. But it was clear by her tone that she knew who I was. She says, "You don't remember me? It's blankety blank from Facebook the other day. We were discussing education. Don't you remember me?" Yeah. Well, Cubans have a saying that perfectly encapsulated how I felt at that moment. Trágame tierra. Yeah. I was like, oh my God. Of course, I had to apologize profusely. The woman was very gracious, and I think she may have forgiven me. I hope that she did. But it did teach me a very valuable lesson. In this small world, you will probably run into those people that you've offended sooner rather than later. And you never know where, when, or why they'll pop up. Ask yourself if winning the argument is really worth sacrificing an ally. And ask yourself what you've really won if you've alienated other people and have rallied absolutely no support. After all, if we the people are going to make changes, then we're going to need all hands on deck. That includes even the people we're not so thrilled about. To be clear, however, step 7 refers to discussions you have with other voters, not with your representatives, not with the people who are running to represent you in government. It is definitely our job to vet them and their history and to call them out on their actions and associations. Clearly, we're not all going to agree on everything all of the time. We each have our perspectives and our baggage. I get it. But if we can agree on even one thing, then let's figure out what that one thing is. And let's work on that together. We get the government we show up for. By joining forces and consolidating our resources, we have a better chance of creating a government that will work for us. It sounds like a daunting task, and it is. The system has been rigged against us for so long that it's almost impossible to imagine a world in which the status quo wasn't calling the shots. But there's a lot at stake, and we've got to try. The fate of our republic depends on it. Lao Tzu said, "The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step." So, let's begin. Thank you. Does anyone have any comments, questions, concerns? Yes? Well, I'll say this. The woman was an educator, and she was used to a certain system. And I think the education in this country, clearly there's a lot of things that have to be fixed, but it shouldn't be politicized. That's something that we need in our nation moving forward. There's certain things that we can't afford to debate. We need healthcare. We need clean water. We need clean air. We need an educated workforce. This is the 21st century. How are we supposed to compete with China or India or whoever if our labor force is unhealthy and uneducated? So there's certain things that we just have to agree that are baseline. And I definitely think education is one of them. Anybody else comments? Sir? No, I agree. And I think a lot of it has to do, I mean, I'm not sure that a lot of people understand the effects of monetary sovereignty. When a nation doesn't have the ability to create its own money, what that actually means to that economy. And sometimes we get into the rut or the way of thinking and politicize everything instead of looking and doing the math and understanding, following the money and understanding what are the root causes of this type of contention, right? So it's usually when the economy is bad. When the economy is good, everybody gets along, everybody loves each other, we're all one happy family. But as soon as the economy changes, that's when, you know, the truth comes out. And I think that a lot of these nations are suffering the effects of the euro, the effects of not having monetary sovereignty, and they're starting to see it, bless you. And they're starting to feel it, and they have contention. We have contention for the same reason. But we take it a step further because it doesn't seem to be enough. And I see this like going on, like every election, it's incremental, right? So it's not something that's like, oh, it's always been like this. No, it's getting worse. And we take one situation, whatever, the shooting, let's just say, for example, this past weekend, which is a horrible tragedy. And it's not a political debate. There's no debating this. It was a horrible thing that happened. But immediately you go on social media and it's, you know, oh, it's Obama's fault or it's the Republicans. And that's what, you know, and it's like, are you kidding? Like, we need to come together. We the people, which is what my book is based on. It's us. We can't expect the government and industry or whatever to do it for us because obviously they have an interest in our contention. It makes money. That's the truth. But we need to talk to each other. We need to understand, okay, there are certain things that we are going to agree on and we are working on those. And let's talk to each other. I was born and raised in Connecticut, which is a very liberal state. I don't know if anybody here has ever been to Connecticut. And I was a flaming liberal my entire life. My mother's right there. She can tell you. Absolutely flaming liberal. Then I went to New York City. I lived there. I phone banked for Hillary Clinton. She didn't get it. I didn't know anything about politics. To me, it was just like, oh, this is rigged. This, you know, whatever with this. So GOP. So I switched over to the GOP. Moved down here, met amazing people. I started working with the GOP for many years. And you know what? I can tell you honestly, I felt so welcome in the community down here in South Florida. Even though I didn't agree with everything, I didn't have to. I have friends here from my days working for the Republican Party that are still my friends now, no matter what I say. Or now I'm not Democrat or anything, I'm independent, but that type of welcoming, you know, nurturing attitude is what we need to have with each other. We don't have to agree on everything. Why? Why can't we just choose to talk to one another and to get to what we do agree on and work on that, even if it's one thing? Wouldn't it be great to just get that one thing done? But how's that going to happen, you know, if we can't even speak to each other? Bless you. I think you have to keep the goal in mind, right? Like, what is your goal? If your goal is to put your agenda out there, or if your goal is to win, or if your goal is to, you have to clarify your goal. If you have your goal clearly in mind, you'll know how to get there, but you have to know where you're going. So I think that we're not in a position right now to argue amongst ourselves for any other goal other than to get to a solution. If you know that that's your goal, when you speak to someone, even if they're coming at you, you know, even if they're aggressive, you're going to remember your goal. My goal is to get this person and myself on a base where we can actually work on something together. I'm going to find out what that one thing is. And once you can clarify that for yourself, you'll know how to get there. But, you know, there's a saying, like, there's good people in the world, everywhere in the world. If you can't find one, be one. If you want discourse, be that discourse. Be that person. and other people will be drawn to that. And, lead by example. I know it sounds very like pie in the sky, but it's not. It's how things get done in this country. No, I didn't say that. I said we are competing with China. Okay, so here's the thing. Competing with China, the way that trade agreements are set up right now, is basically a race to the bottom. So we can't do that. We can't start saying to American, laborers, well, if they work for $2 a day, then we should work for 50 cents a day. Like, where's it going to end? Why don't we just go back to slavery then? Just give us encampments and we'll live there. I'm getting there. So the way to solve that issue is by understanding that trade agreements are what's causing that. It's NAFTA that caused that. Don't look at, oh, well, that was Bill Clinton and I loved him and he's a Democrat and I'm a Democrat, so no, that's not true. Yes, it is true. You need to look at what actually happened with NAFTA and after NAFTA, and that's how China came to be. That's how all of China, their recent power, came to be because of the trade agreements. No, I'm not saying that we should restrict trade with China. What I'm saying is that we need to make sure that when our representatives, the people that we vote for, right, we understand where they stand where it comes to trade. Because once we vote them in, there's no walking that back. They're in there. That's it. And once they make that trade agreement, it's going to affect us. Sometimes we get a lot of smoke and mirrors. Like, for example, I agree with this. Oh, this guy's amazing. This is the one thing that we both agree on, so I'm going to vote for him. But look at what else he's, backing up. Trade is important. Trade has to do with our economy. If you get people into office, they're going to create trade agreements that are going to end up detrimental, not just to the United States, but to the world. You know what happens when an American company goes to China or to India or to Bangladesh or wherever, and they set up a factory over there and they pay those people $2 a day? We can't export anything. That's what happens. So if you have a t-shirt company here, let's just pretend that you like t-shirts and you have this really cool design, right? And you'd love to sell them, and you're on Facebook and people from everywhere are like, oh my God, these t-shirts are great. But guess what? They can't buy them. You know why? Because AT&T or Apple or whoever's over there paying those people crap money. And so it's going to affect not only the United States, but every country, even the small business owner here that, thanks to technology, can actually sell their wares anywhere in the world. They won't be able to because they have no money. And this is the thing about capitalism. And Bill Maher said it best. The youth think that socialism is the answer to capitalism, and the older generation thinks that socialism is the enemy of capitalism, but neither one is right. Socialism is the lap band to capitalism so that it doesn't eat everything. We need to have balance. There are certain things that we need to survive, and for capitalism to survive, it needs consumers. To pay people $8 an hour, how are they supposed to buy anything? It's like shooting yourself in the foot. Of course, they don't care because they figure it's not going to be till like 15. That's true. Yeah.
But isn't having a family a choice though? I'm just saying. I'm married. I've been married for about a year now, and I chose not to have a family. What? No, I agree with abortion.
Or you know what else happens? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. You know what else happens? Sometimes people get married and the husband has a great job, right? And the wife stays home and takes care of kids. And the husband dies and he doesn't have any insurance because he was young, because he didn't think he was going to get sick. and the wife has no work history other than working in her home. And so who's going to hire her? Now she may be 35, 40 years old. She hasn't worked anywhere. She has no work history. She doesn't have technological experience. She doesn't have the education. So she has to work at Walmart. And it's not because she made the wrong choice. It's because life happens. And life happens to all of us. Okay, I'm sorry. Steve keeps raising his hand.
So you think you should increase the? Oh, okay. Sorry.
Yes, Steve. That's true. Yes, Steve. Yes. No. Right. But they're still your friends. Right. Right. Well, in my lifetime, I would say that was 9/11. I would definitely say that. Before me, I would say Vietnam War. I think the Vietnam War was a horrible thing. It was a horrible loss of life, and for no reason, and it went on way too long, and no one stopped it. And that is, I think, when the country began to understand what was really happening in government. And I think that before that, people were more enamored or more trusting with their government. Right. But notice that you said something, Steve. When you were young, you watched the war on TV. But notice that we don't see any war. The United States has been at war for how many years now? 15 years? 15 years. We never see it. When do we see it? So saying that the media is showing us too much or making contention, a lot of times it's the media not doing its job. I personally think that journalism, the job of a journalist is not to be civil, but to be in their face, doing all the research, calling them out, and putting it out there, whether it's nice, ugly, or whatever. And that is the job of journalism, in my opinion. Right. Right. Yeah, Ramon? It's a narrative. It's a story. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, until they show up at a function, and then it's a real person, and then what? Hello, Nadia. Roger? Yeah. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Yeah. Because I was working as a GOP, like I said, for many years. And then a couple of summers ago, I worked for Americans for Prosperity. I don't know if you've ever heard of this organization, but it's a nonpartisan, supposedly nonpartisan, non-profit organization. And its goal is to talk to people and, educate them about economic policy. That's it. So I went canvassing all over South Florida, Coral Gables, Westchester, Kendall, whatever, and with a friend of mine. And we'd go knocking on doors. We had iPads, right? So the iPads had like the same 5 or 6 questions. The last question was, do you identify as an independent, as a Democrat, or as a Republican? So here's the thing. 85 to 90% of the people that I spoke to answered all the questions the same way. Then at the end, I'd say, how do you identify? And they'd say, well, I'm an independent, but I register as a Republican or I register as a Democrat because I want to vote in the primary. So in the state of Florida, you get charged, right? Your tax dollars have to go toward an election that you don't have the right to vote in unless you choose a party. But whether or not you're an independent, your money's going there. So I realized this and I said, this seems very unfair. That's number one. These people are not getting represented. Number two, what really killed me was that, they'd say, oh, are you going next door? Are you going next door? I'm like, yeah, I'm going throughout the neighborhood. They'd be like, be careful with that guy because he's a flaming fill in the blank. Democrat, Republican, liberal, conservative, whatever. But they're answering the questions the same way. And I'm like, you guys are neighbors. You guys have obviously the same interests. And you believe in the same things, but you won't talk to each other because he's a Democrat, the other one's a Republican, and that's why your taxes are going up. That's why your police department is doing what it's doing. I don't want to get into, because that's a whole other day. Because you have no control over what's happening because you refuse to talk to each other. I found that partisanship was the problem. I'm not really in an independent party. I don't do parties at all. I just... Right. Well, a politician will never take accountability. That's never going to happen. The voters won't either because a lot of voters feel that they're disenfranchised. They say, well, what's the point? I've talked to people that they say, I'm not voting. And they say, what's the... And I said, well, you know what? You vote every day. Every day that you use your debit card, your credit card, you spend cash anywhere, you're voting. That is probably the most important vote that you're going to make. Because if industry controls the government, which we already know beyond any doubt that, yes, that is actually the truth, then we control the industry with our money. So that's still our control. We have other ways of being able to influence. I think that there's a like I said in the beginning, when I talked about industry here, because a lot of times people have a very difficult time when I start talking about industry. A lot of mom and pops say, hey, you know, that's not fair. We work very hard, you know, it's a family business and we're paying all these regulations and everything else. And I understand that. But there should be a difference between the way that a small firm is treated and the way a multinational corporation is treated. When I say industry, there's no reason why we all have to say, oh, well, corporation means corporation, whether it's GM or whether it's, you know, books and books. No, there's a big difference between a small mom and pop firm and GM. And there should be a difference between the way that they are treated. So I'm all for small business, trust me. And I believe that people, I would love to see, you know, Walmart leave. Everyone's like, oh, they're going to leave. Good, let them. Because you know what would happen in this country? There would be, well, Elizabeth, I'm sorry, but you know what would happen? We would have so many new entrepreneurs coming up and selling their, and we would be able to have, like we used to have, you know, communities where people go and buy coffee with somebody that knows them, knows your name. You buy your clothes, your shoes, whatever. And it's this, and it builds a community. And maybe we can get some of that back. You know, if we want to go back, make America great again, because we have a time machine now, we're going to go back. At least let's get the stuff that really worked. And that stuff worked. You know, and then we have the big multinationals in here. There's no more community anywhere. There's not. So it would be great for them to leave. I couldn't care less. I think that would be the best thing. And I think we need to stop being afraid of that and actually go like, yeah, you know, if that's what it's going to take, then please, by all means. Roger? Roger? Yeah. But Obamacare, too, is an abomination. I mean, right, over everything. Absolutely. There are things that shouldn't be privatized, clearly. I don't think healthcare should be privatized. I don't. You know, my husband and I, we had Obamacare. Well, they claim. Mark has a good point. Yeah. We had Obamacare. My husband he was in the military, and because of this is why it matters. He was always like, oh no, I'm not gonna vote, I don't care, I'm not into politics. Okay, so the government shut down, he lost his job. He had his contract over at Southern Command, okay, in Doral. And he lost his job one day to the next, just like that. No money, nothing. We had nothing. Okay, I was in school. And then he was like, well, now I get it. Okay, whatever. So we got on Obamacare. He got a job. He got a raise. He got a raise of $300 a month. Our Obamacare went up $300 a month. So that's not an answer, you know, but in the book, I do talk about the healthcare industry, about education, about the $1 billion, you know, debt that we have, student loan debt. I talk about all of that. And I get it. It's a lot of complicated issues. But we need to talk to each other to get to a place where we can find a solution. We can do this. It's not that hard. It's sad. This is just like what happened when welfare, it's the same thing over and over again. And that's why, again, like, I just want to stress, because we are the people that are going to pay for these repercussions. It really is up to us to talk to each other. And I know a lot of times that's going to mean you're going to talk to people that you don't like, but you know what? You're in the same boat with them. So like them, find something to like about them and just come to an agreement on something and pull your resources, because if we don't, I mean, I don't know. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you so much. Thank you, Steve. I had a great time.
Wow. If anything, they've stimulated great debate and conversation, which is always a good thing. So Walmart, $15, right? And shows, right? Piece of junk. No, anyway. But thank you all so much for coming. If you're watching online, give us a call. We'll get a book signed for you. As I said earlier, we'll get it signed and shipped to you. Nadia will be sitting right here. For those of you here in the store, the books are for sale behind the counter. Buy a couple copies, get them signed. Thank you all so much for your participation. Let's get another round of applause for our author, huh? Thank you all so much.